Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to the Follow Me Show. You are here with your host, Dee Dee.
And Mr. Drew.
And today we're going to talk about how to negotiate the sale as a buyer's agent.
Actually, she's going to talk about it. I'm just going to ask her a whole bunch of questions.
So we're going to talk to you about what it looks like in a buyer's market as well as in a seller's market when you're negotiating for your clients on how to get them the deal, whether it seems like a slam dunk or a multiple offer, really tough as nails situation.
Okay, so question. What you're telling everyone is there's definitely two markets and there's a different process with each.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there is. You have to do a lot of digging on one, and then on the other one.
Okay, what is a buyer's market?
Okay, yeah.
Break down a buyer's market. What is a buyer's market?
So a buyer's market has a few different components. A buyer's market has tons of inventory, very few buyers, which means the buyers have most of the leverage. So this will benefit them if, let's say, they need closing costs or they're going in with, I don't know, like a VA 0% financing loan. They are able to get houses that they might not be able to get in a market that has very little inventory and more. It's just supply and demand is what I'm trying to say. So basically, with houses that are on the market in a buyer's market, there are tons of homes. And so a buyer's market, let me tell you what kind of type of year or time of year that is. A buyer's market is typically going to be between, like, especially
winter.
In Central Florida. Yeah, it's going to be what our winter would be. So between September and January is a typical buyer's market.
What about 2008?
Oh,
I'm joking.
That's funny.
Definitely a buyer's market.
Yeah, it was all.
If you had the money.
The year was the year of the buyer's market.
So basically what you're saying is a buyer's market is where there is a lot of houses for sale and not a lot of buyers. So you can pretty much pick and choose. And those times are typically right after school, during the wintertime, etc.
Yeah, that's when. So in Central Florida, because it is a tourist area, you have a lot of people that'll come in from up north. And if they are traveling, they're on vacation, or they just want to they want to move when their kids are out of school. So that's a huge thing, really anywhere. But I noticed in Central Florida that's a big thing. So all the snow bunnies come down between April and early August.
Okay.
So that is not a buyer's market, but if they come on the off season, which is the buyer's market, then they have a lot more chance of getting the home they want.
Okay. So
on their terms.
Got you. So we know now the audience knows what a buyer's market is. So what is a seller's market?
So I kind of went into that. A seller's market is when you have very little inventory on the market, and the sellers have the upper hand because their home is kind of, in a sense, kind of slim pickings. And so there are a lot less homes, and then there are tons of buyers that are looking to buy. So again, that would be like the summertime when everybody's looking to buy and everybody wants to get in to a really good home. The sellers have the upper hand because there's so many people looking out. There's so many buyers and there's so little inventory.
And this is when you see pretty much the prices raise.
Oh, yeah.
In real estate.
Yeah.
Where you see a $250,000 house, I'm just giving a rough example, get sold for maybe $265,000, $275,000.
Yeah.
And that drives literally the market value up. And that is during a seller's market.
Well, if the appraised value withstands, and normally it will because it's a trend. It may take a few months, but yeah, it just keeps driving the market up.
But the appraised value, that doesn't really matter. I mean, I've seen you sell homes where the appraisal comes in at, let's say, $475,000 and you sold it for $520,000.
Not necessarily.
Maybe not that big of a range.
Yeah, it just depends.
The appraisal doesn't have a lot to do with it during that time, or
it does. It has a lot to do with. At the end of the day, the negotiations happen all over again, and that's a totally different podcast. But the negotiations will happen all over again with an appraised value like that.
Okay, so right now
we're talking about the offer process.
The offer process and the initial contract, barring everything be okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
So pretty much like you said, the seller's market is the opposite. Now the seller has
all the power.
The supply and demand is just
they have
the inverse.
The supply, the buyers have the demand on the seller's market. Yeah. So that's why everyone says summer is a really good time to sell.
Right before school. Mm-hmm. Okay. Perfect. Okay. So can you give me an example of of a negotiation on a buyer's market? Let's say it's a $499,000 house, and it's been sitting on the market for over a month.
Yeah.
You're the buyer's agent. How would you negotiate this for your client? What's the process like? What would you do? How would you get this deal? Would you go in at full price or?
Well, whether it was no, first of all, I'm going to say not necessarily. I won't say yes or no. It depends. Whether it's a buyer's market,
it's a buyer's
or
market.
not.
Okay. It's a buyer's market. So you say, hey, you're with your client. They're like, they have the cash or they have the credit, whatever it is, and that's not really a problem for them. Would you be doing them a service by going in there and saying, hey, I'm going to come in at $499,000 full price, even though the house has been sitting there for over a month?
Yeah, well, this is the thing. Whether it's a buyer's market or it's a seller's market, what's important to know is the house has been sitting for over a month, and this is why that's important. It's because any house, and this is in Central Florida specifically, Central Florida, but any house that's sitting for that long, the buyers already have the upper hand. So it's kind of like its own little buyer's market. Is what I'm going to say. So the way that you would negotiate this is, instead of trying to attack anything, you're not trying to level with the listing agent. Your buyer kind of already has the upper hand, right? So the first thing you want to find out, and this is what buyers are going to ask too, if it's been sitting for over a month, they're going to say, why has it been sitting? It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter how many circumstances you can throw at them. They'll always think there's something wrong with the house, right? So the first thing you want to do is
the emotional attachment.
Exactly. Gotcha. They go, it's kind of like when you're married. When you're married, everybody wants you. When you're single, nobody wants you. It's like that with a house. So if it's been sitting for over 30 days, again, especially in Central Florida, they're going to think immediately something's wrong with it, no matter what market you're in. So that's something good to know. So what you do is you do as much investigating as possible. You get to be best friends with that listing agent, first of all, because they're going to end up being your best friend, because you're going to find out everything you can about it. You basically politely bug them. So you call them and say, hey, I love this house. Find any good thing you can about it, whether it's a nice house or it's not a nice house. But, hey, this is awesome. Great location.
So if it's a crappy house, you're saying great location. If it's a nice house, you're saying,
it was well staged. Whatever it is you have to tell them, you just let them know, first of all. Well, let them know that they did a really good job for getting this listing first of all, because they are just the representative. But that just being that representative says a lot if you're stroking their ego first off. And then you say, hey, and my buyers would really they can see themselves in a home like this, so they definitely have tons of questions. Let's just say, for instance, you start them off with the soft questions. Let's say they have kids. So, how are the sellers? Do they have kids? Do they like the schools there? So although, yes, you can look up school zones on your own and all that stuff, try to start asking them soft questions that is not exactly grilling them immediately about the house. Get them to open up a little bit. Like, well, do they like it? Because then you can start to get a profile of the seller. You don't get to ever see the seller, as the buyer. So if they say, oh, no, they're older, they're retired, they don't have any kids, now you can start to formulate a thing. Okay, so these sellers are older, they don't have any kids. Maybe they want to go somewhere else where the grandkids are, something like that. Maybe they want to downsize. Let's say it's a 4-bedroom house. You said it's at $499,000, right? Maybe they're looking to downsize. So you can start to gain a lot of information just by asking questions. So you ask kind of roundabout questions first. Or at least it seems roundabout.
So you're trying to get the situation.
You become a detective without... This is a mistake that a lot of buyer's agents will make. They go in and they say, okay, so what are what conveys with the house? Meaning, what all comes with it? Do the window treatments, the curtains, do they come with the house? And they just ask all of these basic questions everybody asks. And let me tell you, by the time you're asking a listing agent who has a house that's been sitting for 30 days, the last thing they want you to do is call and ask those questions right off the bat. And number one thing is, don't say, why has it been sitting so long?
Yeah.
Ask the other questions first.
Okay.
So you want to become a detective. Then after that, start to ask them about the other things. Like, hey, obviously, I know I'm not the first person to ask this, but what's going on with the house? I noticed that it's been sitting. So a roundabout way to even ask that question is, how many showings have you had? A lot of people ask that.
That's actually a really good question. How many showings do you typically get?
Yeah, like, are you guys right now, are you negotiating any deals? And kind of soften that by saying, because they really do like this house and they just want to see what their chances are. Seem a little bit vulnerable on behalf of your clients.
Got it. And
they will soften up.
Okay.
So those are good questions to ask without them shutting down and you saying, well, if you're interested, just make an offer. Because guys, let me tell you, that's going to happen. Especially with agents that have had a lot of people call or have a showing on this house that's been sitting and nothing's happening and no movement.
Okay, so let's say you soften them up. I guess it would really, the offer would be predicated on the situation. So let's say you soften them up enough, and then what would you do then? Just make the offer at what, about 10 grand less? What's the?
No, the first thing I would do is the next thing I would say is, okay, so here's the situation. Give them a little bit of background about your buyer, even if you don't tell them everything. So this is their situation. This is what they'd like to do. And they want to come in at, okay, so let's say the house is at $499,000. Well, my clients want to come in at $495,000. How do you think, you're putting the power in the listing agent's hand, how do you think your seller would respond to that? Engage their response.
That's only $4,000 less. That's not a very, in my opinion.
You're very right. You would be amazed, though, two things. Amazed how offended a seller will be by that, especially if they think, and that could be the reason why it's been sitting for 30 days too. So you got to keep that into consideration. They might want to hold on to every penny. They might be like, there's no way I'm lowering my price. So you have to see how the listing agent reacts, because for one thing, it might be the seller offended by something like that. And then for two, it might be that the listing agent is a little bit too subjective. And unfortunately, you are dealing with humans.
This is true.
You have to understand the psychology of people.
I've seen this many of times.
These are good things.
The listing agents gripping onto their ego more than anything.
Exactly. So you have to know what kind of person you're working with. It's not all X's and O's with real estate. It's super relational. So you have to really pay detective and then psychologist.
In my opinion, I would just think, if it's sitting for over a month, I guess over a month's that long. Maybe if you're getting to the 3-month territory, and that goes back into, it's predicated on the situation. So if they're kind of desperate, then maybe you would go 15 grand less.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
So if it's okay, they're not that desperate, but they do want to sell it, that's when you'd probably come in 4 or 5 grand less.
It all depends on a lot of factors. Like you said, if it was sitting for 3 months, they might be willing to go down. But you also have to see, before you even get on the phone with a listing agent, try to do as much digging as you can too. So you're going to go on the MLS and see, obviously, how many days has it been on the market. But then at the bottom of the MLS, almost every MLS, no matter where you are, the system will show whether there's been any price decreases. What's awesome about the app is that it'll show you right away. Has there been a recent price decrease, increase, price improvement? So you want to find that out before you call too. So when you're calling, you're not asking the questions they can just find on the MLS. You want to ask hey, so I noticed that X. I noticed that there had been an increase, or I noticed there hasn't been any price change. Do you think that the seller is willing to work with that? Don't ask any yes or no questions. Ask things like, if I came in, give them a specific number. If I came in at $495,000,
how would they feel?
How would they feel? And see what the listing agent says. So I'll go back around to that.
Okay, I understand. So basically, that's when the buyer has all the power. You want to play detective big time, kind of feel them out and see what your range would be for negotiating in a
just
buyer's market.
Asking as many questions as you can before basically committing to an offer and saying, okay, my client wants to do X.
Okay, all right. So let's flip the script. Let's say now it is a seller's market. That looks completely different, I'm sure. Let me give you an example. Let's say it's a multiple offer situation, and the list price is $345,000 right in downtown Orlando. Okay. What would you do then?
A multiple offer situation and a seller's market, I'm assuming you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay.
So what I mean, now we're moving from buyers to sellers.
Okay. So this would be, let me paint a little bit more of a picture too. This would be, let's say, July. July is one of the most brutal months in Central Florida, not just in the heat, but yeah, it's freaking hot and you're showing homes all day and then they finally want to make an offer. And the house you want to make an offer on, it has 3 other offers on it.
Oh
and
my God, I love this house.
yeah, and I have to have it and I'll stop at nothing to have this. Okay, so the house is at 345 and they already have 3 other offers, right?
Okay.
Now, this is
Do
when...
you know off the bat what the offers are?
No,
Okay.
you don't know until you start talking to the agent. So first of all, this is where a good social network online comes into play. Of course,
Refer to episode 1.
yeah, exactly. You're really going to understand who you're working around, especially, again, if you guys are marketing the same areas, you're going to run into the same agents, same circles, same brokerages. So you get to know people really quickly. I've done deals with agents like back to back from the same office,
The
same
Cuervo
agent.
team was someone that you're doing deals with, right?
Yeah.
The Cuervo team a lot.
Well, there were 2 back to back, so I thought it was interesting that I got 2, and they were both multiple offer situations, and I got both. But anyway, and this is how I did it. This is how I approach. This is a great example. We know each other through social networking, offline networking, just constantly running in the same circle. So this kind of situation will come into play, or when it comes into play, it's very beneficial to have a good networking system and just be, an awesome person that they say like, oh, she's everywhere, he's everywhere, blah, blah, blah. So that's that.
This is true.
Yeah. And then on the second part of it is just, this is when you start kind of putting your all hands on deck. Like, okay, you want to pull out all the stops for the situation. So with my client, what I would do is the same as I did with the first scenario, even if it was a buyer's market, find out as much as you can, but find out as much as you can before you even call them.
Okay.
You want to see everything you can know. Start getting good with looking at patterns. Like, more than likely, in July, with 3 other offers, this house probably hasn't even been on the market for more than a week. I would say more than a few days. Because when
Especially
it's hot,
in Central
it's hot.
Florida, where
exactly.
Yeah.
So you want to find out as much as you can, and the key here, guys, is you act fast. Don't let, if your buyer loves this house, you let them know if they don't know. This is when you tell them this market moves fast. We cannot afford to wait. So if you want to make an offer, we need to go ahead and do it. So you need to either be having your transaction coordinator writing the offer before you're even calling the listing agent, or you're doing it. Whatever you need to do, you need to get it written and have, or be using Follow Me Realty's template on writing out that contract right away. Because here's the thing. Those 3 offers, the agent's probably going to be submitting to, they'll say like, okay, highest and best by the end of the day, or highest and best by this day at 5 p.m. Normally.
And that would be on the MLS, highest and best?
Yeah, it'll say it right on the MLS. A lot of times it'll even say it, it'll say it like in the realtor remarks, like, hey, we need your highest and best by this time.
Got it.
And so you need to act fast. Sometimes they don't even tell you, especially if it's been on the market for a few days and all of a sudden they have 3 offers. So again, I can't stress this enough and I can't say it enough. You have to act fast. So you get as much information as you can, but you got to go pull the freaking trigger too. Call them and say, hey, I see obviously you have a lot of offers. And hold on, I want to back up and say this too. You need to set your buyer up with the proper expectation and say, listen, it has 3 other offers. If I'm going to go in for you and do this, you have to know that you really want this house. How willing are you? If they are just perusing and putting in 1 offer here and 1 offer there, and then they back out a lot, let's set them up with the right expectation to say.
I think that's probably a podcast too for another date. I'm
Sure.
talking about how you deal and handle your buyers.
Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's just say they're super 100% in.
Yeah.
You go to the listing agent.
Let's assume they're good to go.
Okay.
They understand what's going on.
Listen, I've dealt with it so many times, I felt like I had to say it. But let's just say they're all in, ready to go. You need to go to that listing agent, use whatever personal power you have with regard to networking, and if there's nothing there, if there is, whatever it is, then you go in and say, listen, my buyer loves this house. Obviously, you've got a hot commodity on your hands, and I know that your seller does at this point. What do we need to do? Immediately ask them out the gate. What do I need to do to get this house?
So I'm the
listing.
I'm the listing agent. Mm-hmm. Well, what do you mean? What do we need to do?
I'm not going to waste my time or your time or anyone's time. I see that you have 3 other people that want this house. I see 3 other people, or you're telling me you have 3 other offers. I want to know what I need to come in at. And they may or may not.
Well, I can't tell you an exact number, but I can tell you.
But you can tell me what's too low. You can tell me what the margin is.
I can tell you anything over 348. They're probably going to be happy with that.
Mm-hmm. And there you go.
And that's how the conversation goes down a lot of times, right?
No, that's in a perfect world.
Oh,
that
okay.
almost never will go down like
Okay.
that. I wish. What they'll probably tell you is if you ask them, okay, how do I come in?
Well, the reason I say it because I've heard you negotiating deals like this before, and they said something along those lines, or am I?
Yeah, they did say something along those lines, and I was actually very happy I even got that, because a lot of times you'll get listing agents that'll say, I can't give you that information, which, to be completely honest with you, if the seller is okay with providing information like that, the listing agent can provide whatever the seller is okay with providing. So that's not technically true to say that they can't. But that's kind of like a tactic that listing agents will use. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's just their negotiations. So then the way you come back at it is saying, that's fine, you don't give me that information, but just level with me. Where do I need to come in at? Give me something. So even if they don't give you an exact number, they might do something like you said, or they might just say, listen, you can't come in less than such and such. Don't think about asking for closing costs. It's not going to happen. And then from there, you have some information to say, I know where to go.
At least you're pulling. So what I'm hearing is get as much, no matter what the circumstances, although technically it's going to be different, you're trying to pull the information as much as you can so you can make an educated guess on how you can attack it.
Right, and the more often you do this, especially in a market that's about to happen right now in this year, I can feel it coming. The more often you do this, the easier it's going to be.
All right. Well, I get the gist of it. Basically, it's different, but it's the same with your buyers. Or I'm sorry, in the buyer's market, it's pulling information, then making the best educated guess, and the same thing in the seller's market. It's pulling as much information using the trigger words that you talked about,
right,
and then making the best educated guess on how to put in that offer. And firsthand, I've personally seen you do this about 4 or 5 times. So I really like the trigger words that you use.
Well, when you're in a multiple offer situation?
Yes.
Yeah, for sure. So again, with the buyer's market, the thing is trying to play detective and really doing a lot of the same things, but with the seller's market, you have to act very, very quickly. And this is when like a good transaction coordinator or assistant comes into play, because you don't have time to run to the office or run home and do the contract. You need somebody who's going to help you fast.
Yeah. And so in a perfect world, we would sign the contract. You'd say, okay, my offer is 3. So this is the multiple offer situation. You're under contract for 440.
Yeah.
And this is the perfect world. Everything goes through financing. The appraisal came in. Your inspection came in. Everything's dandy. You're at the closing table, shaking hands. Boom. But that's not the perfect world. So, what would you do after that? Or is this a podcast for later?
This is definitely a podcast for later. There are negotiations that happen after you're under contract, and it's something that a lot of new agents don't expect, but definitely worth knowing. One thing I want to say, and that's going to be a podcast for later. I want to tell you guys something too, as far as what to do in a hot seller's market when you're up against multiple offers. There is a trick that very few agents use. I don't know if it's because they don't know about this, and I don't think they even know about it, but it's something that you can have under your arsenal. So as a new real estate agent, if you know this right out the gate, you are leaps and bounds ahead of a lot of agents that are already in the industry. So if you have a multiple offer situation, a good thing you can do is you put that offer in for your client and you produce a kickout clause. And what that kickout clause is basically saying, my client, let's say your client has a pre-approval for $350,000. $350. There's not $350, $350,000. The list price is $345,000. But you know there are multiple offers, so it's definitely bound to go up. But you say, hey, well, if you really have 3 offers.
Oh, yes, the kickout clause. Okay, I got you.
For every offer they get, let's say they have an offer for $345, we will beat it, and the clause will say this, whatever your client's specific terms are, by like a $500 or $1,000, however you want to do it. So if you have an offer that just came in for $345, that's one of the 3. You'll beat that by, $1,000. So we'll put in $346,000.
So the kickout clause is like the e-snipe when you're bidding on eBay. You're saying
exactly.
You're saying the price is $5, and I'm willing to go up to $7. And every time someone passes,
not to
go
exceed,
$1 over. Not to
exceed a certain amount.
Gotcha.
And so you can put more than what your pre-approval price for if you are financing. You just have to be willing to put more skin in the game yourself. So put cash forward if you want to have that house that much. And at that price, and with the, if you really love the house, then if it's something you're willing to do, it makes sense. But here's the thing with the kickout clause. The listing agent needs to legally, according to the clause, produce the other offers in writing to prove that they weren't. So that way that there were real offers.
So
that way they can't jack up the price.
Well, that's a great clause, because that way you're finding out even more information.
Yep.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So that's just a really good, and I've used it, and it worked wonderfully. I was very happy to be able to use that.
I think that also entices the seller, so they're like, oh, they're willing to go up to $350. Mm-hmm. They're willing to play ball. Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah,
I'll tell you as a new agent, your buyers will love you for that, because I remember when I used it with Mike, he was really excited that I did that.
Happy. Yes,
and he ended up going, I think, only like $2,000 more than his original offer, so it wasn't so bad. But he beat out the other person, and the person had no idea he had a kickout clause. So it helped.
Mm-hmm. Working with weapons behind the scenes.
Oh, yeah. So that was cool.
Nice. Okay. Well, let's wrap it up. Let me ask you a few questions pertaining to this, and maybe where some agents can get some more information on. So, question number 1. What book would you recommend new agents, developing agents, anyone that wants to know more information on the art of negotiation?
I would, The Art of the Deal.
Donald Trump?
Yes.
Okay.
Because you can love him, you can hate him, but this book is very, very good with understanding negotiations and understanding what's going to drive certain deals and what's going to be key factors in buying, getting an advantage in the buying part of things, selling part of things. I'm not going to go too much into detail, guys. You have to read the book, whether you like him or not. He's a billionaire for a reason.
This is okay. The second question is, what process would you recommend you do in order to sharpen your negotiation skills?
I would listen to someone that is outside of your comfort zone, not someone you already listen to. So if you let's say you just listen to something motivational as it is, or maybe you don't listen to anything at all, start listening to something if you don't. And if you already do, go with somebody who's going to kind of push you out of where you already are. So just start Googling like motivation, or on YouTube, motivation, entrepreneurs, not necessarily real estate, just something, kind of get a feel. Now, I'm not specifying only because to sharpen your negotiation skills, I think the first thing is start exploring what other entrepreneurs do, the way that they speak, the way that they will handle certain situations. There's a plethora of information of how they got there. One person I would recommend, definitely, if you want to get really tough as nails at it, is Dan Pena.
Okay.
Yeah.
The $50 billion man.
Just
Google him, folks.
And he's not for the lighthearted, ladies and gentlemen. So if you get offended easily, he's not the person to listen to. But he is a person to get you out of your comfort zone.
Okay. Well, that wraps it up for the day.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much, Ms. Dandrin.
Thank you, and
we'll
thank
catch you guys
guys
next time. Thank you for tuning in to the Follow Me Show.
Yes, we are.